what will happen next once the money enters. And without investment, there cannot be prosperity. So the impact is very huge. And that is why, as a lawyer, we always advocate transparency, not only in the system of governance, but also in our rules and regulations. If you don't have clear rules that regulate particular process, it will be difficult for the investor, either local or foreign, to decide this is what I want to do with my funds or with my ideas. And in that process, we will be stunted, we will be stagnated as a country. So the impact on the economy is huge, apart from the fact that monetary gratification bleeds the economy and it leads to capital flight. There will not be sufficient investment in that particular society to generate employment, to generate income, and to make that society prosper. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, so that's my point.
Barrister Kotoye, what are the legal framework from government or the society, the cultural check on corruption in our society?
Well, let me start with the cultural check, because, like I said, it is the aggregation of our ideas and view that makes up a society. And as a member of a society, we must have agreed to a social contract. Now, if you look at our traditional society, you will see that in every community, there are those that they refer to as the conscience of that community. They may not particularly occupy political or administrative office. And there are norms which those set of people try to uphold. They try as much as possible to ensure that that community keeps to its tradition, keeps to its practices, keeps to its norms as they have agreed. Let me cite a practical example. I know that in my own village, that you cannot bring in a gugu. Masquerade, we don't do masquerade in my village. Meanwhile, there are several other deities that they worship and they keep to it. It is a complete anathema to bring a masquerade into that village. There are people who ensure this is done. We need to go back to that particular system. I only use that as an analogy, not that I'm saying that is what everybody should do. We need to go back to that system where in every community, in every city, on every street, we have people that insist that our culture, our tradition, our belief, our system, our norms, this is what we hold dear to us, should not be eroded. And in that process, they ensure that those who are in administrative position in that society, either as the chief, an oba, bale, or whatever, insist that those norms must be obeyed. So if there is an infraction, there is also a punishment system. If there are people who had excelled, there are reward processes. We need to go back to that. Now, let me go to the government aspect. Fair enough, I was also part of the initial workshops on those who drafted the ICPC Act, the first one. And one of the motivating factors was the report of Transparency International as are there that grouped us as the second or third most corrupt country in the world. And I can still recollect that the team then was led by Mr. Kindela Noesien. And one of the things we're looking at is how to strengthen institutions, especially governmental institutions. I will elaborate on that later, to check corrupt practices and how to ensure that those who are involved in corruption, either in terms of monetary gratification, abuse of office, influence peddling, and other sharp practices, are brought to book. And that was what led to the ICPC Act. Now, what we have seen over the years is selective application of the provisions of that act, including that of the EFCC Act. Now, to make it more impactful, we need to strengthen our institutions. We need to ensure that institutions are strong. We don't need strong men in power. We need men who can recognize that those institutions had been there before they came to power, and they will be there after they had left power. This is because institutions outlast individual. As individuals, our life is terminal and ephemeral. But with a strong institution, there will be a basis for the society to grow. And those institutions will also, at the same time, serve as a check on the executives. Let me use again, sorry, I'm very close to the grassroots, which I'm sure you are certain of. Let me use the Egba system of administration as another example. You have the Ogboni setup. I'm not talking about the ROF. I'm talking about the Ogboni in each locality where there is an Oba. That Ogboni institution is a check on the excesses of an Oba. The essence of the Ogboni institution in Egba land is to serve as a restraining institution against the excesses of an Oba. So we need to have such institutions that we can, when there are excesses on the part of the executive, legislature, or the judiciary, that can say, no, this is the limit of where you can go. And I also draw inspiration or analogy again from the January 6th invasion of the Congress in the United States. You will see that at the point when the former president became recalcitrant, it was the institution that rose against him and forced him out of office. He instituted multiplicity of suits. He incited people politically. But all the courts spoke with one voice, irrespective of which state, whether Republican or Democrat. And they insisted that that election was properly held, that the votes were properly counted, and that he lost. So he had to accept that he lost. Pardon me, sir.
No, so they can go ahead, please. There's just a voice.
It is the institution that threw out the former president. And when it got to Congress, irrespective of the political divide, the institution also came to play. So we need to ensure that we have a strong institution that can outlast an individual. Once we have that right from the local government level to the federal level, we'll be able to have a situation where No president will come and say, oh, you have to watch my body odor, or you have to watch my body language, because there is a particular regulation. There will be a set regulation, there will be a set standard, a set norm, which you must and you cannot afford not to comply with. So, one, we have to build the institutions. Two, we have to ensure that those institutions work. Not that somebody will now come and start tampering or maneuver the institution or so as to achieve a particular end. No, we have to ensure that they work, and we have to insist that they work. And that is where citizen participation comes in. You and I have to be involved in the entire process. It is our country. We have no other country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barrister Kutoye. From your presentation so far, we found out that corruption is a midway between moral and legal matter. You referred to our traditional society and the ways they have struggled to tackle corruptions or serve as a checkmate on our morality. How do we then get here? How do we get to where we are today? What are the causative factors for corruption in our society? Is it greed? Is it just in the nature of human being to always want to circumvent the law?
Well, you will permit me to say this, but that is my personal opinion. And I believe most strongly that the corruption level we have now in this country became aggravated more under the military. And one of the reasons why I find it extremely difficult to relate or resonate with anybody that has a military background, pardon me, it is my own weakness. Because the military actually destroyed the basis of the nation, or how our founding fathers believe that nationhood should be attained when they intervened in 1983. That intervention was a complete no-no for me. However, we have reached this stage, and it has become a cankerworm to every one of us. We all have to rise in unison to face the challenge, because if we are not careful, and borrowing the words of Mr. President, it may likely consume all of us. And I use the word again advisedly, it may likely consume all of us. That is why and where you and I as elites comes in. My little understanding of being an elite in the sociology class, which I did, is that our role is to set standard and norms for the society, to set examples. We are supposed to be like the guardian light. Elite, unfortunately, our own elites appear to have lost it. We are more interested in material accumulation, personal aggrandizement, show off, and then idea of me and my family. And that is not good for nationhood. We must have a common ground. Let me use the American system as an example again, the last election. If you notice, even those who were not members of any political party came out strongly to condemn the former president. not to talk of those who are members of his party. I remember clearly people like Colin Powell and Susan Condoleezza Rice led the coalition, and those were core Republicans. That should be the role of our elite. Let me come back home. The G34 that was formed penultimate to Abacha's demise played a very critical role in the return to civil rule under Abdul Salami. And if you see the composition, go back to the composition of that G34. I think they started as G32, increased it to G34, and thereafter I think they became G38 or so. That should be the role of the elite. You will see that they ensured that Abdul Salami kept to the faith, kept to the timetable, since he had given the promise that he is going to return us to civil rule. The elite have a major role to play, and it is incumbent on all of us as part of that elite, because we cannot deny that fact, that in all our doings, in all our comments, in all our activities, we should eschew things that may likely destroy the basis of our existence. That is one. Two, we all have to go back, like you said. The issue of corruption is both moral and legal, and I concede. We all have to go back to the basic essence of our existence as a human being. Otherwise, we may likely descend into the Obitian theory. Because at the end of the day, you actually, if you are not careful and if it's not well tackled, even in your own house, under your own roof, you have your children engaging in corrupt practices, and you may not be able to say anything about it. But if we as elites and leaders or supposed opinion molders take up the gauntlet and decide that no, this is how we should be, I am certain everybody will fall in line. Now, let me go to the legal aspect of it. I often shudder when people say, oh, judiciary is this, judiciary is that. And I ask myself, are the members of the judiciary, are they not products or offshoots of the society that we are complaining of? Just as I will ask myself, are police officers that we complain of or complain about not members of our society? Of course they are. It's a reflection of the rots in the society. Don't let us delude ourselves about it. It's a question of the rot, the basin level to which we had reduced ourselves to. Look at the recent invasion of Justice Odili's premises. How can a magistrate or supposed magistrate issue such an order? That's another version of another example of corruption. No matter the reason, no matter the guise. So we need to do a soul search amongst ourselves. And we need to come to terms and reality with ourselves that we are descended extremely low and we need to prop ourselves up. Finally, on that point, leadership is now key. Apart from the elites, which I had said should be the moral, moral standard, we have to demand of our leaders that they must at all times live by the ethos of the oath which they had taken. I can bet you if we are not careful, I can bet you if you are not careful, by the next round of 2 elections, even if not 2023, you will have, I'm sorry to use the word, Yahoo boys contesting and winning elections. You will have fraudsters using illicit funds contesting and winning elections. I'm not a doomsday prophet, but with what we have now, it's scary. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barrister Kotoye, Senior Advocates of Nigeria. For viewers and listeners, we need to say that all this interaction is also taking place simultaneously. Some people are complaining they are not able to sign in via Zoom. They can also link up. The links have been shared. That's the YouTube link. This is being live streamed. It's on live stream on YouTube. Barrister Kotoye,
thank you.
Is corruption only at the government level or even in our home, in our private capacity? I also need to ask, by the extant laws in Nigeria, there's what they call plea bargaining. In your own view, do you two think plea bargaining is a correct measure of tackling corruption? Do we fight corruption or do we even prevent it in the first place? Thank you.
Now, let me start with whether corruption is only in government. I will tell you clearly, and I use the word clearly, that even in churches and mosques, you have corruption. I don't intend to offend anybody's religious sensibilities, but that is the stark reality. And I will give 2 instances. Let me use our Yoruba aphorism as another analogy. Sorry for listeners who don't speak Yoruba. I'll do a loose translation, which says that the collections in the mosque should be shared or are meant to be shared. Shared amongst who and by who, with who? I will also say this, that when the Financial Regulatory Council bill was in the pipeline, I participated at a point because the former MD, I don't know whether he's been, the DG, I don't know whether he was restored or there after that crisis. Jim Obazi is my friend, and he invited me to do a presentation. And at the end of the day, when I saw the draft, I just told him, because I know him very well, I said, Jim, I hope this thing will put you into trouble. Between me and you, my brother, that council or that bill, if they had allowed it to work as anticipated, most of the issues with our religious organizations would have been curbed substantially. Because let me give you a simple illustration. Like the charitable bill, charitable act in England, you cannot be taking money from the public and say because you are the owner of that particular organization, you are not accountable to anybody. Even the Bible does not support it. I know it's controversial, but for me, I think that is wrong. So we have corruption in every area of our human existence. Unfortunately, we seem to celebrate it. That is the sad part of it. And where you expect people to demonstrate leadership is where they often fail. So let me go to the second part, the plea bargaining. Plea bargaining itself, it's not particularly a bad idea. Please don't get me wrong. And I will explain. For those of us who did jurisprudence, because I've seen among some of the participants that I know clearly very well. Plea bargaining is from the American School of Sociology, or American School, sociology in jurisprudence. We call it the American School. That the essence of punishment is not to kill the offender. Let me put it this way. The court system exists as a mechanism to punish any offender for whatever infraction the person might have committed. However, the American school believes that both the court system and the prison system should not be to kill or completely destroy that particular offender. That because Mr. A committed this offense at this particular time does not mean that he's totally useless to the society, or that he cannot be useful in another form for that society. Therefore, you don't have to punish him, or you don't have to destroy him completely because he had made a mistake. And which I agree to. So that is why there is what we call restitutional and reformative policies. Reformative, to correct, to make you see that what you have done is wrong and it is unacceptable to the society. So if you show penitence, you may be forgiven and reform you to make you a better citizen. Restitution in the sense that, okay, if to say you had stolen from the common till, or you've dipped your hand into the cookie jar, and you show enough remorse, we will, or you will forfeit those things which you had used the illegal funds to acquire, and thereafter make you serve maybe a light sentence, and then you go back if you show that, yes, you are now a different person. In some instances, it has worked well. In some other instances where there had been a backlash, that is the philosophy behind plea bargaining. And in most cases, it is always done with good intentions. Because you will see either the judge who is going to preside, or the prosecuting personnel, or the correctional officers who we used to call prison warders before, looking more at the larger picture rather than their personal gain. So for me, plea bargaining is not in itself a bad idea. But when it becomes political, like we have now, is where the problem is. Or where they now make it appear that, okay, if you want to come and join us, do this, and do this, then you go and enter into a plea bargain before the court. That is where the danger is. Because in that situation, you are actually removing the whole essence of that theory and defeating it in its entirety. So as said earlier, it is left for all of us as members of the society to consider first the interest of the society above our personal interest. I quite understand that there are some people who circumvent or like to circumvent the rules. That is where a strong institution is needed. That no, this is outside the parameter of what you can do plea bargaining for. Or this is not what plea bargaining should be used for. But if you don't have such an institution and all you have is a strong individual who thinks, oh, he knows everything, he will just call them one day and then say, okay, let him go and do plea bargaining. And that will be it. And the entire process will be corrupted. There will be abuse of office, and the whole thing will become a mess. So plea bargaining in some instances can serve as a deterrent. That's the point I'm trying to make. So rather than to destroy those who are said to have committed an infraction and to make them to be useful in some other way, they can enter into a plea bargaining. The plea bargaining does not necessarily mean you go scot-free. No. You can make them to go into community service. You can make them to go into something that will not be profitable to them. Let me use the example of a particular ex-convicted armed robber who now turned an evangelist. All of us know his name and we know his story. So, because you enter into plea bargain does not mean that you are totally free of what you are charged for. And because you want to do plea bargaining does not mean that the system can still not punish you for your infraction or your errors. No. Plea bargaining can be, okay, instead of sending you to prison, the blah, 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 we will ask you all this that you are the illicit, acquired in an illicit manner, you forfeit it, you agreed, yes. Okay, in addition to that, you have to be resuming at Cheshire Home for the Blind for another 6 months. This is apart from the fact that you will now go to secondary schools and you'll be teaching them, or you deliver lecture at least once in a month on so subjects. And you will never forget. In fact, it is even more deep than sending such a person to prison that is already over-congested. I use the word over-congested, not just congested. That is already over-congested, and that where they will end up being like executive prisoners, and people will be treating them with some difference. So plea bargaining for me has my vote. Thank you.
Thank you so much, learned senior advocates. Now let me yield the space or the floor to our participants. If you have any questions, kindly raise up your hand so we can call you. If you have any question, I'll still come back to some questions for Barrister Kutoye. So if anybody here have any question. Mr. Abib White. Can we have questions for our guest, our speaker in the house today on what has been discussed so far? Mr. Abib, Ambassador Abib White. Mr. Rahman Olayinka, please, you have the floor, please.
Yeah, good afternoon. Special thanks to Barrister Yinka for the thoughtful speech so far. My question is, I would like to know the origin of corruption itself. Is it as a result of, let's say, from the imperfection of the government that led to the circulation of corruption, or corruption is just a general thing, a general pandemic that each and everybody find it difficult to shy away from? I don't know if my question is clear.
Yeah, it is. Can I respond to that now?
Yes, let's just respond to that, please.
Okay. You see, it will be difficult to state clearly the origin of corruption. Maybe some other scholars on that subject will have more knowledge than I am. But the little that I know is that I think, using the biblical story of Adam and Eve as a compass, I think that corruption has been with us from time immemorial. Because what happened in that story, in the simple term, was that the supposed snake or Satan corrupted Eve, and she influenced her husband to eat the forbidden fruit. So that's another form of corruption. However, I will not agree with you that corruption arises only because of the imperfection of government. Permit me to disagree, and I will state my point. Those who we often elect as leaders are products of our society. There is no way that you can separate them from the society where they come from. I don't know whether I'm making sense.
Yes.
Yes,
can
sir.
hear you.
Yes, I know.
So it is not particularly imperfection of government, stricto sensu. Yes, government errors, mismanagement, bad governance, bad leadership contributes to it or enable it. But it often emanates from our conduct within our respective society. What we believe in, what we celebrate, what we lay emphasis on, those are things that breeds corruption. And I said earlier in my the byline to my last comment that if we are not careful with the rate of Yahoo now as we have it, by 2023 or the next cycle of elections, we will certainly elect fraudsters into government. They are not corrupt before because they got into government. They've been corrupt before they got into government. So I'm sorry, that is my mindset. I might not be right or absolutely correct, but that is the way I see it. Whether corruption is a generic thing, yes, it is. It is. I will have instances that somebody narrated to me this Sunday, amongst one of those recently arrested somewhere, where they said the EFCC guys was asking them to come and give them 350,000 naira to get a bail. Just this Sunday. So you can now imagine the security guard or the law enforcement agency charged with stemming corruption asking for money to release a suspect on bail. Is it the government that asked him to go and release the suspect on bail? I mean, is it the government that asked him to go and charge 350 before releasing the suspect on bail? So it's more pandemic than what we think. And it is more deep than the way some of us are ready to admit. That's just the truth. Yes, governments as leaders or as those who are supposed to protect us can enable, and in most cases, by their policies, actions, inactions, omissions, assist corruption to fester. That is the simple truth too. But it is not limited to them alone. A lot of us in most of our conducts are engaged in corrupt practices and we always shy away from it. So that is my short answer to that. I hope I've been able to respond well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kotoye. Can we have Mr. Ademola Adejobi? Then after him, Mr. Omitogun Tohib. Mr. Ademola Adejobi, please.
Good morning, San. Ademola Adejobi here from Houston, Texas. Great and a very educative discussion here. My question here is, listening and thinking about your comment about having Yahoo boys in government at some point using their Hill-acquired funds to get into government, and what are some of those factors we can consider in trying to prevent this from happening? And also, it's been a big thing on how can we eradicate corruption in our society. That has been something on our minds for a very long time, but it seems like corruption continues to grow and fester within our society. So just thinking and wanting to see, brainstorming on this and how this can be done to eradicate corruption within our society. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. Do I respond to that too? Or?
Mr. Omitogun Tohib, can we have your comment, please, so that Barrister Kotoye will be able to take both questions together?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Yes, sir. My view is corruption has found its roots into every system in the country. Virtually every system in this country. To the extent that for anything to work so well, it takes the grace of God. Now, from what our co-host said in years to come and elections to come, fraudsters and their others might vow for posts and being at the realm of affairs of the country. With the rate at which it's going now, is there ways or possible solutions that can minimize or eradicate situations like that? Even at times, the agencies charged with fighting corruption, ICPC and EFCC, it becomes doubtful for us to believe their at times. Different scenarios, different circumstances that they themselves, they involved in actions that make the citizens of the country to doubt the authenticity of what they say they are doing, their mission of being establishing the anti-corruption agency. Is there ways we can work towards minimizing or to eradicate the inflow or the rate at which corruption eats into the system of the country?
Okay, thank you. Let me start with Mr. Omitogun's comments. And let me use my personal experience as an example. With regard to the same agency, which I think both of us have in mind, I had a client who had a trade dispute with her trading partner. And she came to me. She said she was afraid of going to meet them. I said, no, we have to go and meet them. We got there. Deliberately, they stalled attending to us until about 4 p.m. And we've been there since, I think, early as about 10 or 11 a.m. And at the point when she was supposed to be released to go, they said the person who was supposed to sign her release warrant is not available. And I asked them, is she on bail? They said yes. Is she under arrest? They said yes. Someone that came willingly by herself. And they said they've been looking for her for so long and that now that she had come, they need to ensure that she will come back the next time. But I said, but she came with the lawyer. Of course, we started the argument. The officer that was involved became upset, said I was doing too low. And of course, I learned my lessons dealing with them. I decided to go to their organ, who I know very well. When he saw me, he knew there was trouble. But because we've known each other a couple of years back, he attended and said he cannot take decision behind that officer. Now, this was at 7:38 p.m. That particular officer had left his or her desk as at 4 when I started the argument with them. So it became clear to me that they deliberately stalled releasing that woman so as to create a pressure. And of course, they created that pressure. They succeeded because the woman started panicking. She's a single mother. And her children were in one of these schools in Ikoyi where they don't allow children to stay beyond a particular point. Otherwise, you have to pay. And of course, she didn't have her phone with her. She had already submitted her phone at the gate. So there was no way she could contact that school. And you know, women, she started panicking. And she was weeping profusely. She was weeping profusely. So I had to tell my friend, you don't need to do this. Yes, I agree that she, out of fear, your previous invitation, she had refused to come. And then now I'd made her to come. Why do you have to punish her for coming? And of course, they started their usual story, blah, blah, blah. And it's okay, fine. What do you want? Anyway, as at 10:30 p.m., my friend said they can only release her to me. This was a trade dispute. Of course, they will make allegations of fraud and all the likes. That unless I'm willing to take her on bail. Okay, 11:15, I had no choice because I can't particularly leave her there. Eventually, we didn't leave the place until about 11:35 or 11:40 thereabouts. Funny enough, after we left, she was supposed to return. It was a Thursday. She was supposed to return the following Tuesday. The IPO had reached her behind me and started telling her that you've got to involve a lawyer, blah, 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 and the usual story they always say. And of course, made her to come and enter into terms of settlement behind me. Without telling me, she went in panic and entered into the terms of settlement. In the law enforcement agency's office, not the court. And of course, they took money from her. After paying the first installments, the woman ran away. And then the FCC came after me. Of course, as at that time, I didn't even know she had entered into that terms of settlement. She did not bother to tell me. And then the FCC ran after me that because I took her shorty, I must necessarily produce her. I started looking for the woman, I couldn't get her. And then I wrote to their chairman. Went to see my friend and said there's nothing they can do. As at that time, I didn't have this detail that she had entered into terms of settlement and that they have actually collected money from her. So as a typical lawyer, I have decided that, well, I have to find a way to get myself out of this mess. So I wrote another petition to the former chairman, went to see his chief of staff. I don't know what happened in between. The client just contacted me. I'm like, what is this? And she explained and sent details to me. But she thought she had settled it. They told her this, that, send them to me. Of course, she sent me the terms of settlement, the first check she paid, her bank account. Without me waiting for anyone, I just went to court straight against all of them. My partner was a bit apprehensive in the office, and they were like, oh, blood, no, I'm not taking chances with these people. I went to court against all of them. I sued that head of their zonal head personally, though he's my friend. I sued the IPO and I sued the chairman. That was when they stopped harassing me. So you can see when I said that the system or the corruption has eaten our work. It is deeper than what we think. That's an agency that was supposed to do investigation, now engaged in debt recovery. Where they got the powers from, I don't know. But don't let me go beyond that because we're still battling each other. Now, how do we prevent these Yahoo boys from entering into government? Using the experience which I have had. That's why I had to narrate that personal experience. Sincerely, between you and I don't have an answer at the moment. Because you also have an agency saddled with that responsibility that is already infiltrated. That's the stark reality. Because if you now say that, okay, they should start going to arrest them or looking for them, investigating them, blah, blah, blah. I've cited 2 instances. The one that happened recently and my own experience. What makes you think those officers will not turn it into money-making venture? I don't know whether I'm communicating.
Yes, you are.
So we need to look critically at the issue. Maybe by way of suggestion, I don't like to be absolute in my position. By way of suggestion, we can limit campaign funds. By way of suggestion, we can do what we call tracing. We now have BVN. Maybe EFCC should be able to now use that to do proper investigation rather than the Gestapo manner in which they now carry out their operations. Because the little experience I've had with them, they just don't have it when it comes to investigation. They just lack that capacity. What they do in most instances is maybe somebody had, there are 2 people who have issues with themselves, and then one of them will go and come right, and then blah, blah. The next thing, they will just go and bust the other person. I have a hunch that that is what actually happened in the recent raid of an hotel in Abeokuta. Then somebody will now go and write, and then before you know it, they will swoop on the place and then carry all those who they can arrest, cause lots of public embarrassment. And then after that, they will not start saying you should come and negotiate bail first. After bail, they will not start looking for information. It is after they are arrested that they will now start looking for facts to use against you. I don't know where that works. I haven't seen any system where that works. The bit that I know is that the investigating authority would have done a very thorough, painstaking investigation, detail, so that even when they come for you and they confront you with it, you will think twice before denying. You will think twice. But here, what they will have is they will just create a public scene, enter into your premises or whatever, take whatever they want to take, arrest you, ask you to come and negotiate bail. You will now negotiate, give them money, and then thereafter they will ask you to be coming and now be using whatever you bring. Not that they have done any investigation anywhere. It is whatever you bring. They will now ask you, okay, bring this, bring this. It is whatever you now give them. They will now start to use to investigate you. It's a whole lot of mess, my brother. It's a whole lot of mess. But like I said, I'm not a prophet of doom. I may not have an answer or a clue to it, maybe because of the limited knowledge that I have about the whole thing. If any other person have an answer, I'm open to suggestion. But as it is, I think we're in a very big situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leonard Silk. If we take more questions from people in the audience, but while at that, Leonard Silk, how do we then strengthen our moral institutions? Because there's a school of thought that says corruption derives from economic problems. People are unable to feed, people are unable to send their children to school, government is not making provision for certain things, that corruption was a little less in societies where some basic needs of the society have been provided by government. What do you think we can do? Then we can also take questions from Mr. Pascal Adejobi. Pascal Adejobi. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, sir. Good morning, Leonard. Son. This is more like a follow-up to what the son was saying, was discussing about the EFCC and law enforcement agents and their high-handedness. So a couple of times I've had to engage at least my friends that are in this sector. And what I've been able to gather from them is that these people who go about raiding hotels, raiding people's homes, that is totally out of their jurisdiction, that they don't even have, that some of those officials did not even get consent or approval from the appropriate authorities to be able to do that. That you can tell me, this particular friend of mine told me, he works with the EFCC, and he told me on good authority that most of these guys are just overzealous and they are going about these things the wrong way. And that, as a matter of fact, he told me that just before we spoke, he said they had this discussion in their offices, that he even told one of them that very soon he would even be happy if some of these people will start getting hit by chance or something. You get what I mean? So I think another angle we also need to look at this thing from is, how do we tackle this thing by the way of letting citizens, letting the masses know their rights, know what they need to do to be able to tackle all of these things, all of these problems that we are faced with. Because it is one person today, we don't know who is next. All of these actions carried out by these officers of the law, so to say, sometimes lead to death of people, lead to injuries, lead to all of this. And some people people who can barely afford a square meal. I don't, is it that same person that will now say he wants to pursue a case in court? And on top of that, even our jurisprudence, our courts are not really helping matters. You have situations where somebody, I was listening to a press conference yesterday, and you have people who are arrested since the time of the NSAS. Their cases have not even been heard in court. These are people who were just picked up at random on the street of Lagos and all of that. They are still there rotting away. So my question is, how do we move away from this? Because I feel it's ignorance. I feel it's a matter of, okay, maybe the masses are not enlightened enough to be able to confront most of these situations. So how do we educate everyone? How do we educate people to the extent that when they are confronted with all of these problems, they know the right questions to ask, they know the right things to put to the officers? Because, for example, if you're an NDLEA officer, for example, and you say you want to search me, the first thing I ask you is to show me your fingernails. If you're a police officer, I have the right, if you say you want to search me, no problem, but I have the right to also search you to be sure that you're not trying to incriminate me with anything. Same applies to most of these people. So how do we put all of these things out there for people to know? And like Mr. Steve rightly said, sorry, sir. Mr. Steve rightly said, a lot of these things are happening because people are impoverished. People cannot feed, people cannot think. People cannot put on their thinking cap because this government has or let me say our leaders have made sure that people cannot take decisions on their own. They have made sure of that. They have made sure. How do we move away from it? It's so sad. People die in this country every day, officially and unofficially. As far as I'm concerned, it's as a result of failure of leadership. It's as a failure of leadership, from NSAS to the death of pupils here and there. It is still as a failure of leadership. And these are the same leaders that enjoyed scholarships, that enjoyed foreign trips, everything from this country, from the policies, and they cannot replicate the same thing. But this question begs for an answer. We need to find a way out.
We have Mr. Emmanuel Ramoseli. Mr. Emmanuel Ramoseli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Steve Oliyide. Thank you, Honorable San. I have really enjoyed your responses and how you tackled the issues and questions raised. Perhaps one of my questions will have to wait until you respond to the question the moderator has already asked just now about tackling morality and all that. But the next question I would love to ask is even related to what the previous speaker just said. When we talk about enlightenment, perhaps we should enlighten a lot of us because we lack, a lot of us are ignorant about our rights and so on. But I'll tell you this, that even some persons that know their rights still get frustrated oftentimes by the system. It's everywhere. You have issues with the electricity body over estimated billings. You keep writing and writing. They frustrate you. You have also mentioned an issue with the security authorities, how they delayed and all that. So there are people who have rights. They know their rights. Someone wants to search your phone and we've heard them say it without that number, that no one has the right to start searching your phones or going through your things without appropriate warrants and all that. And so my question is, how do we actually fight institutional subversion, fight cases where people that are operating these institutions are deliberately subverting their position, especially when the system itself frustrates all our efforts? You want to do things by the book, they'll frustrate you to the extent that sometimes you just get tired. You just get really depressed, emotionally disturbed. Sometimes people may even be forced to cave in, to yield into that thing which they say they will never do. They tell you bail is free, you wait, you just be rotting away there in jail. You want to take the issue to the court. You keep adjournment. Oh, they tell you they are giving you an estimated billing. You keep writing. They'll be throwing you around. Next thing you know, they will even be victimizing you. How do we fight all these things? You go to some civil service offices today, they will be playing you like ball. Your file may be somewhere, they'll just be playing you like ball. And if you don't find a way to part ways with something, some form of gratification, your document, your claims may never be attended to, probably in the next decade, unless you can part ways. So how do we really deal with
In other words, estimated corruption.
I'm sure you totally understand by question. The system frustrates too, apart from poverty and everything, which is meant to fuel corruption itself, but the system itself frustrates. So how do we deal with this thing too? Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, please, can we take Mr. Patrick Osu for the last?
Sorry, moderator. Okay. Let me quickly respond to that, because he had asked a very good question.
Okay.
And I'm delighted. Yes, before I forget and before I lose my thought.
You have the floor. You have the floor, Leonard Silk.
Thank you. You see, you use the particular word, frustration. I concede clearly to you that the system is frustrating. I have no doubt in my mind about that. But one thing I've refused to succumb to is to allow myself to be frustrated. I don't know whether you understand Mr. Emmanuel Erumosele.
Yes, sir, totally.
Exactly. You know, this, you might have a frustrating situation. It is another thing for you to allow that system to overwhelm you or frustrate you or succeed in frustrating you. Let me use the example of the client that I narrated earlier. We went to court, like I said, and the judge, for some reasons, which I understand, also became fearful and stereotype. Even as I am a lawyer, I am the claimant. Instead of the judge to look at the facts before him, he was not concerned about the powers of the EFCC. Don't they have a right to? But it is their it is the law that you took about someone on bail. You have to go and produce the person. Blah 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 blah. At a point, my partners also disagreed with me. But at every turn, when we have discussions or meetings in the office, I always say to everybody, including the other lawyers, I haven't done anything wrong. That it is not their responsibility to be collecting debts on behalf of a complainant. And I didn't stand surety for purposes of recovery of debts. And I insisted. Well, the system might be frustrating, yes, but I won't allow you to frustrate me. They've taken away the judge, they brought another judge who appears a bit to see the point we are trying to make. We are still on. Now, what am I drawing out of that? We have to insist. We have to insist clearly, especially when you know you are right. It may be difficult, really, because of the environment we operate, which is understandable. But once you insist and you make your voice heard, at a point, someone will see your reasoning. And let me link it with Pascal's comment. Between you and I can tell you for free that the courts are overworked. That is the stark reality as well. Secondly, the judges too are members of our society. They also have their own fear and nuances. Intimidation, where you can, a system that can go and invade the number 2 judge in the whole country, can go and invade her residence. You can imagine what they will be able to do or what they are capable of doing to someone who is just a magistrate in one locality. You understand? So basically, everywhere there is tension. But however, it is our right as a pupil, a student, as citizen rather, to insist this is the limit of what we can tolerate. When the Black Lives Movement started in America, and everybody, you could see that they got something out of it, especially in the state of Georgia. So there is always a result, but we must have a resolve amongst ourselves to say, no, this is the limit to which I can go. With the invasion of the hotels, let me say this clearly. I have as one of my clients their umbrella body. We have advised, we have written, even before this particular incident, when they first did it in Lekki, the first 2 hotels they did in Lekki, we have written to advise them to go and challenge EFCC. Like Oga Emmanuel said, everywhere we just like to subvert the system. And it is because we often shy away from challenging them. There is what we call pushback in social activism. If there is no pushback, they will keep on doing it. I haven't seen any law that allows them to invade an hotel or private residence under whatever guise without a search warrant and embarrass everybody, strip people naked. I haven't seen. So we need to get that clear. We must have a way to push back. And we are the only ones who can take back our system. Otherwise, we will still be subjected to this level of ignominy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You will pardon me, I have very limited time left, so please. Oh. Hello?
Hello, Mr. Kotoye. Thank you very much. You know, our time is almost fast spent. We have just about 10 minutes to go because this program is supposed to last just 2 hours. And it shows that it has been a very interesting engagement. Can we just have Mr. Patrick Osu for a very short question so that we can run this program off? Mr. Patrick Osu.
Hello, good morning.
Yes, morning.
Thank you for having me, and I thank the learned senior advocate for the submissions he has made in respect of this topic. I'm also a lawyer and I practice commercial law, and I've been in practice for at least 27 years. So I'm very much aware of a lot of the things that he has said. But I think mine is more like a comment, come question. First of all, do we not think that the reason why corruption persists in our system is simply because there are no consequences? Because in a system where there are no consequences, people are given to anarchy, people are allowed to do whatever they like. People do things because no one is going to do anything about it. I've listened to the few examples that have been made about people going to hotels to raid them, people going to Justice Odili's house, for example, and nothing has happened. And it's been done time and time and time again. So the simple reason, in my own opinion, is because for every action where there are no consequences, what you do have at the end of it is a loose cannon that breeds anarchy. That's the first one. The second point is that I also listen to other speakers talk about whether it's a function of people not knowing their rights, or it's a function of people not being allowed to do something that they should be doing correctly, or it's a function of maybe people don't push back enough. The reason why that is, again, in my opinion, is when you have a society where you have destroyed the moral fabric, which was bred by the simple fact that you had education at the very foundation of all of those things, and education in itself is destroyed, there's no likelihood that you could have people with moral upstanding. Now, the reason why some of us in this fora are speaking the way we are speaking, are concerned, is because we actually have been brought up, educated rightly, and at the point of education is when you receive your moral instructions. When education goes to the dogs and the government does not see it fit to ensure that education is brought back to where it should be, you will have all manner of people finding themselves in the holes that they are today without any consequences. So we talk about our legislature and the people who come into politics. If you look at the lines of people who would like to be in politics, the otherwise set of people that call themselves the elites, you can't breach that gap any longer. Why? Because at the point where it was okay to participate and participate freely without all these roadblocks that we have today, we all sat back. We sat back not because we wanted to sit back, but because we saw what happened pre-1999 and nobody believed the system. The system was told a lie. Nobody believed it. And those who thought they could, regardless, were the cobblers, the mechanics in your neighborhood, the people who were selling, who did nothing. They were the ones who became councillors. They were the ones who became local government chairman. Today, they become House of Rep members. Today, they've also become senators, and some of them are governors. So if we do not deal with two things, making sure there are consequences for everyone's actions, or go back and begin to retool our educational system, we can continue like this as long as the country exists, and nothing is likely to change. I saw some clip of one of these Asian countries recently. Luxury vehicles that were brought in that people had, and they could not account for how they came about those vehicles, were put out, and the president and everybody sat down, and they got high rolling caterpillars to smash them, simply because one, you can't explain your source of income. You don't pay any tax. We don't know how you arrived here. How did you get all of this within the system? So when there are no consequences, corruption must exist within that society. And maybe Leonard Silk, I'm sure you would agree with me that if you have a situation where, for example, the examples that have been made about the EFCC people, where somebody is subverting the situation, the cause of justice or whatever it is, and the person is brought to book, and you see the fellow man jailed, and he stays there, there's no likelihood that his colleagues in the office will begin to do what that man did that put him in jail for 20 years. The American society thrives because there's no respect for, it doesn't matter who you are. Once you do it, you're going, if you can't do the time, then don't do the crime. It's not the case here. Until that changes, not a whole lot to change. That's my submission. Thank you very much.
That is a very wonderful submission. I said it was a comment, except if our Leonard Silk will have one thing to do. But while we are there, Mr. Gani.
I agree with him. I agree with him 100%.
Thank you so much. Mr. Gani Omitogun, would you want to give a vote of thanks? I know that our Leonard Silk has a flight to catch. He's been talking to us right away from the capital of Nigeria, Abuja. Mr. Gani Omitogun, the project head for this project, can you please give a vote of thanks to appreciate our guest speaker for today?
Okay, thank you so much. We would like to appreciate the efforts of Mr. Adikwe, the resource person, son. We appreciate you for the thorough grooming you actually gave. And I believe that many people have actually go home with something. And I think in a summary, we must keep beating we must keep beating until our morale improves. Just that the society, actually the association we belong to is an advocacy group and a humanitarian group. And I believe that we must do more on the advocacy. Let people know their rights, the right time to do things, and we should be able to speak up at all times. We thank you all for participating. And I want to ensure that we have a creed, which is to have a society that is sane and egalitarian. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, everyone.
So viewers and listeners, the transmission of this is on our YouTube channel. It can still be played back. This will be widely circulated for those who could not participate in today's event. Mr. Kutoye, thank you so much for coming. It's our sincere pleasure to have you here today. Until such time, we'll have a program of this nature again. We'll hope anytime we call on you, you'll gladly honor our invitation for subsequent program, which is part of our enlightenment programs for the general Nigerians and the whole world at large. Thank you so much all for coming.
I appreciate
it. Thank you so much. Okay. On this note, we can call it a day. Thank you.
Thank you.